So my name is Allard Luchsinger. I'm a venture capital investor at Velocity Capital. We invest in early stage, kind of Series A, maybe pre-Series A fintech companies, and we do that mainly in Europe and in Africa, but also a bit actually in Asia. So.
Yes, my name is Georg Ludviksson. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Meniga. Meniga is one of the leading companies in white label digital banking solutions across Europe.
And Meniga is one of our portfolio companies. We've been an early investor in Meniga, and we've been with Meniga for quite a few years right now.
I think for me, I would say two things. One, and we hear that in almost every talk here at Money 2020, is that it's for banks to stay relevant, they have to think about the customer experiences. And differentiation is all about creating superior customer experiences. So I think that has never been more clearly stated than this year. I would also mention open APIs and open banking. There's a lot of new companies, new services, aggregating APIs, creating APIs. So I think modularization of banking is happening.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, I mean, I totally subscribe to them. Another thing, and as an investor that I look at and I think is really remarkable in a way, fintech has long been a promise, and there's all these companies that were pretty small and that were doing interesting things. But what you really see now is that some of these fintech companies are really starting to make a big impact. So it's not only companies like Meniga that are now serving large customers and getting investments from major banks, but also, for example, you look at a company like Revolut. You have a CEO here that tells you that they've been existing for 2.5 years. They have 2 million customers, and the subtitle of his little part at the show here was "Banks, are you afraid right now?" And I think in a way, what you see maybe for the first year is that really the breakthrough of some of these fintechs having a real impact on the financial services landscape.
I think it's clear we are in the middle of the early stages of a fintech revolution. There's so much investment now by banks, by investors in fintech, and I think it's never been more interesting times in the industry. And I think we are seeing a revolution in terms of modularization of banking and creation of open APIs and access everything as a service. We're in the early stages of banking as a service, breakup of the value chain. And the interesting thing is I think the jury is very much out. There will be many winners and some losers, and different kinds of strategies and players are emerging, but very hard to predict kind of who those winners will be at this stage.
So I think one thing we can say that there's one sure winner here, and that's going to be the consumer of financial services, because like what you really see now is that banks, to compete with the Revoluts of the world and the other fintechs that are really breaking through, and the challenger banks, they really need to get their act together, create experiences that are way more relevant and more interesting and for customers than they are today. And they are actually doing this. They're investing very heavily in getting this done, and you slowly see it coming in your own banking apps. But this is really going to all come online in the coming years, and that together with, of course, new players that bring fantastic new services to market. So I think it's going to be a really great period to be a banking customer, and I think the heat is on for banks, and I think that there's going to be some real new winners in the fintech space.
Yeah, I would second that. I mean, we already see much better and interesting customer experiences, user experiences, both in digital banking and in neobanks and new fintechs. And we're have only seen the beginning of this. We've seen many more services, so consumer is the only certain winner. Prices will go down, services will improve. I think there will be winners and losers. I think it's hard to predict, but it's clear that you see from the kind of cult-like status of Revolut and some others that I mean, there's a lot of, I think that growth will continue, and some others have relatively basic services. So I think you will see some clear winners and on other growing not so much. But I think there is substantial room for neobanks. The big question is how fast can the incumbents respond. But I'm fairly bullish on the prospects of the neobanks. The competition is intense.
Absolutely, and one thing of the neobanks is they need a lot of money, a lot of investment. So I think what you will start seeing in the coming period is that some of them will get all the money and get lots of investment and are can keep on growing and breaking out of the pack. There will also be some that actually aren't not performing like their peers, and they will have difficulty raising all those tens of millions or hundreds of millions of euros and dollars that you need to actually build a bank like that. So I think that's what we'll see playing out. Some of these there will be a pack of winners that will really break out, and I think some will have difficulties continue to fundraise what they need to keep up.
I think definitely. I mean, PSD2 is, I think, the catalyst for many of the things we are now seeing. That's giving investors confidence to invest that the data will be available. I think some of the emerging neobanks and fintech companies are relying on PSD2. Banks are also now, I think, for the first time, you will see more aggressively using PSD2 to help their customers bring in data from other banks or even neobanks. So I think PSD2 really is the catalyst and is making things move faster. However, I also think that in some sense it can be overstated. PSD2 has its limitations. It's not real time. One of the key success factors of Revolut, for example, is the real time feeling of using it, which you won't have with data aggregated through PSD2. But it's really a catalyst, and I think many countries, banks, fintechs will go beyond PSD2 once PSD2 has taken effect. It's having an enormous impact. I would argue that OpenBanking and PSD2 is the most disruptive thing to hit banking for decades. It's breaking up the value chains. I think we'll see a similar trend as we saw in the telco industry 15, 20 years ago, where you don't necessarily need to own the whole value chain. You can, and we see different strategies of banks emerging. We have neobanks, we have banks focusing on becoming a sales and marketing company and not necessarily having every product on their balance sheet. So packaging services and modules from fintechs and other banks and selling them as a kind of aggregator or kind of recommending the best possible product for your customer, not necessarily owning that product all the way. And so we're the early stage of that trend, and yeah, so it's having an enormous impact. It's driving investment across the board.
Yeah, and it will. And I couldn't agree more. So it will force banks actually to choose, right? There is no with OpenBanking and PSD2 to really keep your customer. You need to give that customer a great experience because the customer can now really choose. It's not only the guys with big balance sheets that can actually give that experience to a customer. So banks that really want to compete in this need to choose to become very different kind of players than they are right now. So nobody knows exactly where this will go, of course, but that things will not be the same looking back 5 years from now. That's totally clear. And we said it before, we'll have new players that have become really, really large and very successful.